our panel discussion. Let me display the agenda of our discussion and introduce our new guest. So we are already know Piero and Letizia, and hello, Gomathy. You will speak later, but in a few words, tell us about your experience.
For sure. Really excited to be here. I've been listening to all of the talks so far, and I think they've been amazing. So yeah, super excited to be here. So I'm Gomathy. I work at the math company. We are a data science analytics firm. So what I do here is I joined as a data scientist, but slowly I understood the importance of design in a lot of insights that we're delivering. So currently I'm setting up the design team here. We're working on building user-centric products and also help with driving adoption of the same. So yeah.
Okay, and we continue our section started from creativity, design approach, product approach, and let's talk about this. And I will ask such a tricky question again to ask you choose a side. What is primary, data or design? For example, in my business intelligence world, true data scientists will say your pictures is nothing without quality data. But today, Jacopo said a great phrase that key factor is impact. And if you have an impact, you will collect the necessary data. So what is primary in your opinion, or how do you find this balance? Let's continue with you, Gomathy.
Okay, perfect. I think I'm a data scientist at heart. So for me, it's all about looking at Excel sheets and trying to different combinations of rows and columns and finding out the insights first. That at least has been my process so far. Once I found at least the closest way of getting to a possible insight or information, that's when I start exploring designs. And so it's more of a double-sided approach, if you will, just moving a little bit from the data side and of course exploring a lot more on the design and then converging on it. So yeah, probably a little more on the data side than the design one for sure.
Okay, Piero, what is your opinion?
Well, this one's easy for me. I come from the design background, so the obvious answer should be, of course, design, because when I look at data, for me, data is sort of the raw substance, the creative material to explore different solutions. The moment where I start sketching in relation to the data, of course, but creativity and design is my playground. To give you another example, in one of the teams I work with, often we have this terminology called the squint test. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it, or maybe it's just something internal, but the squint test, which squinting actually is that gesture where you close your eyes a little bit and you look at something like at 3 or 5 meters on a distance. For example, it could be a sketch on a wall about 3 meters. And when you're squinting, everything is a little bit blurred. You don't really see the details, just see kind of the overall thing. With the squint test, you can see if you have a wall at 3 meters from you where there's like maybe 10 different sketches pointed at you, which one is the one that is speaking to you, even if all the details are fuzzy. So again, it's an example where design can become the visual identity and the shape to create an identifier for that project. And this is not to say I don't care about data, of course, but here we have to pick side. We have to kind of share our starting point of view. So maybe that's mine.
Okay, so you start from the design. What's about you, Letizia?
So I think that for me, the thing is that when we talk about design, we usually, and in this case here, we need to step back from design as just a visual perception or just graphics. Design is a method, and just like any other field area, for example, even in scientific research, if you have data, but you don't have a good scientific method, probably your data is not worth anything. So I would always say the method is bigger than the subject matter that you're looking at. So it doesn't matter if it's design or something else, if it's data or something else, I think that the method is always comes first. So if we're talking about applying design as a method, I think it comes first because it is the one that actually helps us ask the questions, understand the user, and then apply the subject, which is data in this case here, to its best use. But it's always a combination. But I would have to go with methodology here. I would have to go with the design side, not graphics, not visuals, but the method itself. So I'm kind of in between, I would say, but it's more to design.
Yes. So my way to find this balance, so is something between. And previously we discussed this topic with our speakers, and I've got a new phrase for me: visual science. So it's not about drawing pictures, but it's about designing data model, designing user experience, making research, and after that, yes, we will draw sketches and mock-ups. And
can I add something real quick to what you said? I think that we have this sometimes this belief that data is unbiased or data is everything and translates everything, but data is always a choice. So depending on the choice that you're making with your data, you're making it more or less reliable, right? Data is not everything. So I think that for you to make good choices, you need good methods and you need good design and you need good scientific methods. So yeah, I wouldn't care. I think that if you asked me 5 years ago, I would have a different opinion. But today I am more on the side of like understanding what are the choices that we're making, you know?
Yeah. And another one question about design approach, how to develop this visual thinking, this creative thinking, because as a former data analyst, I remember how it's hard to start from blank page, from raw data, and draw or image anything. So how did you manage this issue, or maybe what exercises, life hacks, tips and tricks do you have for our audience who are true data analysts? Let's start. Let's continue the same order. Gomathy.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think I really resonated with what you were saying in terms of methods, right? And I think the first thing that I do, especially, is once I get the data, I just run a Python code and visualize every single column with the other column, so that I'm able to find multiple different patterns, right? So that's the first set of analysis that I try to do. With that, we're always able to see some relationship that forms, even though it doesn't make perfect sense. It couldn't be a hypothesis that you would have thought of. That's the perfect place to start to understand, the hidden details and patterns from the data. So that's the first thing that I definitely start with. And of course, I think the creative process remains the same in terms of understanding the users, trying to find out what is the emotional message that we're trying to convey. And I like to focus on that a lot more, instead of just understanding what do you want to see, but more why do you want to see it and what are you going to do with that information, right? So getting deeper into some of those insights and some of those reasons on why people need to see something. And in terms of data art, it's what's going to connect to them, right? It's about those elements that's going to speak to you and for that particular message as well. So brainstorming on some of those things. And another thing that I really believe in is collective intelligence. And I don't think we emphasize on that enough. Design thinking has been a word which has been abused quite a bit, but some of the exercises that they have is extremely powerful, right? There are exercises where you borrow from biomimicry, for example, where you take inspiration from biological, phenomena that happen around you, or world tour, where you brainstorm and then you go to another table and help with their ideas without any context of what they've done so far, but just getting that perspective of different diverse set of people, I think has been really helpful in my process for sure. And just another thing that I want to call out is I know a lot of folks try to say, go to Pinterest, look for inspiration of say data visualization or data art. But I found the most inspiration in very odd places, like a Netflix series, for example. It could be something completely different and not something related to whatever you're working on. But those small messages or just a simple quote or a visualization on that particular series could actually inspire you. So those are probably some things that I would love to see. I'll let the others also chime in.
Okay. What do you think, Piero?
I love the Gomathy's answer, especially on the inspiration side. I think even just going for a walk in your close by park is often an amazing source of inspiration. In regard to my answer, I think I will try to stick it to a very classic way. And what I often tell to students of design that I might sometimes teach courses of data visualizations starts with the foundation of the 5 Ws and the 1 H. So before you actually start to get really creative, you need to have nailed down the right questions, whether it's trying to find out what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, who is the audience, when does this project needs to be delivered, which is extremely important for students when they need to understand the value of deadlines, the value of constraints. Only then, when all these things have actually been ironed out, then you can begin the more creative phase, which again, it starts with another set of questions. These questions might be, like Gomathy was saying, due to the power of collective thinking. You need to get into workshops, you need to get into groups, especially if you're working in a team. In the case of maybe a solo project, let's say that it's your creative, self-initiated project, and it's just you, your data set, and your design tools. If it was me, normally I have two mindsets. I have the sort of the analytical and the freestyler. And the analytical is the one that has all these drawers sorted. So I have all my bookmarks, all my resources in a neat place. I am an absolute nerd of Notion, if anyone in the audience uses it. So I tend to connect all my bookmarks with projects and notes, which means that if I look at an old project that I worked on, I don't just see my notes. I also see previous inspiration sources. So again, I think of myself as a visual person, not just in the output, but also in the way I feed my curiosity and my creativity. So I like to use tools that allow that visual expression to always be there. And then there's the freestyler hat, which we've talked about at length today. What it means is, for a designer, means having a process that sometimes could be a linear process. You start with a sketch, then you build it up with a wireframe or a schematic where your data starts to take shape, but you're still away from your designer's tool, your color palettes and your typography. Meanwhile, it might be a moment where you want to build a mood board, you want to design a style tile, which is just a portion of your design, so that you can start to see how it looks like. And only then, when all is said and done, you can move into production and maybe build if you're working with a developer. There's other tools and resources that I love, like I often refer to the double diamond process, which is kind of like a expansive process of questions and experiments, and then you have to synthesize and summarize all these answers before you do that process over and over again. But I think I've talked at length, so I'm gonna stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. And what would you say, Letizia?
I don't think there's much to add. I think that they made really, really good points. I agree to all of them. The only thing that I think it's important for us to remember is that sometimes we believe constraints, which are the basic rules or the basic elements that will give you a sense of where this project is going. So resources, time that you have, which is also a resource, are things that are bad, but not necessarily, because sometimes when you try to be creative without understanding your limits, you will get frustrated. So I think that being creative within the constraints that you have is a constant exercise that you have to do. And I agree that inspiration comes from anywhere in life. So don't just work, go live your life. I think that it's the best way for us to get inspired, find new air and new things. And also sometimes don't get frustrated because you weren't able to put that idea into a specific project. As Piero said, we're also Notion crazy people in our company. So I think that keep the things that you like somewhere, and eventually a project's going to come along that you're going to be able to go back and say, now this is perfect, because it wasn't perfect then, but it is now. So I think that it's a full circle. It comes around, you know, life is long. So you have lots of inspirations to try throughout your life. So make sure that you use that experience that you have as a way to keep pushing and thinking with new things.
Great words. Don't just work, live your life. I agree with you. And my personal experience that I'm not effective being alone, calculating alone or drawing alone. But if I have an audience, and when I start to sell my ideas, I get this inspiration. And so my approach is even not to draw, but speak and sell idea, and it starts to engage a creative process. And short last question before our next speaker, about finding insights. If you have such experience, then when this design approach has brought any business insight which was invisible in traditional reports, spreadsheets, dashboards, something else. Do you have such experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on a day-to-day basis, across multiple projects, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we wanted designers to be part of an analytical engagement from the beginning till the end, because they will discover things that probably me or any of the data sciencey or logical minds probably won't, because we focus too much on the truth, which is what we call the data, but not so much on how folks are reacting, right? Even small things like how they're reacting to an inaccuracy, for example, on a call is something that we need to take, because that's something that they might face every single day when we're building out the product as well, right? From something as simple as that to identifying bookends. And I think that's a very big piece in terms of, sure, we're building a forecasting model where we're adding a value, right, in terms of a number, but what are they using that number for, and what is the next system that it connects to, is also an important thing that we try to find out from a design perspective, which normally won't come from a data science person at all, right? And even when we think about a business flow, we say, yes, you start from this Excel sheet, and then you upload it on another Excel, you get the forecast number, you put it on your SAP system, and then you get your merchandise in order, right? But which is the point where it gets very annoying. And when you do it every single day, what is like the common mistake that you make, that we will be able to save time on, are all things that we try to identify through the design process. And that leads to a lot of insightful information from the data, which we then transfer into the products for sure. So I think just having a person with a creative mindset from a design background has completely opened up the number of insights and the kind of insights also that we've gotten in our organization. So yeah.
Okay. And we have 1 minute rest for our discussion. Your insights, guys?
Okay, I'll keep it really short. I just remember a very interesting anecdote from Alberto Cairo, which resonates with me, because often he was saying, often I get called on by clients to help at specific stage of the project, and often there is a bit of a discussion between where a visual thinker, in this case a designer like Alberto Cairo, but I feel like my role is similar. When should we come into play as visual thinker? Do we come into play at the very early stage where data insights are still being discovered, or do we come into play later? And of course, it's always good to be involved in conversations early on, but our real role is often to visualize, to help finding solutions for visualizations. If they call a designer like me at a very early stage where insights from these data sets have not been discovered yet, of course, I will probably immediately think of people like Gomathy or other data analyst experts that I can bring into the team, because I might not be the best person to do that. So it's always really good to have a collaborative team where there is a researcher, a designer, a developer. So I guess I'm coming to the same point that Gomathy was doing. It's all about collaborating together. And I'll
Thank
stop
you
it there for time.
And you, Letizia?
I think that they are correct. And I think that from an analyst point of view, how can you support designers is one of the things that in my early analyst days, that I'm not anymore, but you know, one day it was. I think that I used to write everything down. So it didn't matter if it made sense or not, if it was something that was synthesized enough or not. I wrote absolutely every insight that I could think of. And then I would have a moment that I would discuss them with other people. So sometimes I've seen analysts take things that are too well-formed, too pretty, and then it doesn't have room for improvement. It doesn't have room for discussion. And I think that that's a mistake. You should be able to share them as soon as possible, as clumsy as possible, so you can grow from there. You can ask more questions and develop more. That's where I think design has a huge role, is to open the minds of analysts, data scientists, and so on.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts.